Half-Life. When you think of innovations in gaming, this is one of the games that comes to mind. Half-Life was the debut game of Valve in 1998 and was published by Sierra. The game runs the Gold Source engine, a fork of id Software's Quake 1 engine that was licensed to Valve and heavily modified to introduce major features specifically for this game. You take on the role of 27-year-old Gordon Freeman, arriving late for work at the Black Mesa research facility in New Mexico. You are armed with nothing more than a PhD in theoretical physics. You are not a super soldier, tough guy, or even a badass killing machine, but that last one has certainly been proven wrong decades ago, hasn't it? When a scientific experiment goes horribly wrong and the door to an alien world is opened, things go from bad to worse as the complex is overrun by hostile aliens and the US government sends a cleanup crew to take you out along with them, using your intellectual prowess to... Oh, who are we kidding here? You have guns and you beat them to death with a crowbar. As the arsenal of first-person shooters grew, so did the demand for real estate on the keyboard. Instead of reaching all the way to 0 on the keyboard to select the 10th weapon, Half-Life arranged its arsenal into 5 groups: melee, pistols, assault weapons, high-tech weapons, and throwables. It keeps the weapons organized and easy to access when you need them. You have a standard military arsenal consisting of a shotgun, submachine gun, grenades, and other explosives. Black Mesa scientists have created the energy weapons, the Tau cannon, and the gluon gun, and the aliens brought over their own arsenal of hornet guns and tossable snarks. You have a wide variety of weapons to play with, and I'm surprised by the usefulness of every weapon throughout the entire game. You would think that because the crowbar is one of your starting weapons, you would stop using it once you pick up the bigger and better weapons, but in this game, the crowbar retains its usefulness because many objects can be instantly destroyed by it, such as vents and certain boxes, and because of the Glock's accuracy, I used it throughout the entire game, even against the final boss. Here is a rare case of a game from the 90s where every single weapon is useful and doesn't become obsolete. All throughout the Black Mesa complex are the remnants of the science team and security guards. You can order them to follow you, and the security guards will provide you with cover fire. The scientists are defenseless. They can heal you if you're low on health, but other than that, they don't seem to have a huge impact outside of a few key moments. They are there for the sake of the story and to set the game world, but its approach to storytelling is what set it apart from other games at the time. The loss of control for the player almost never happens. Certain scientists and guards will present you with information of the area ahead and tell you what's going on in the story, and while sometimes they're necessary to open biometric locks or to operate an experimental device, you don't have to stand around and listen to them before they would unlock the door you needed to go through. Building a smart and complex AI was virtually impossible at the time because of the limited hardware and the amount of time and resources to make such a thing, so Half-Life simplifies things by incorporating the pathing into the level design. Every intelligent enemy can take advantage of a number of invisible nodes connected to each other, so instead of getting stuck on complex geometry, they can look at the pre-placed nodes and determine what positions relative to the player can be used to take cover or flank them. There are limitations to this method. When a soldier is moving to a node, they cannot stop. They cannot return fire immediately. They have to finish their move. They're capable of moving without these nodes, but their movements are much simpler. A soldier will never retreat without a node to retreat to, but considering the limited processing power at the time, you have an elegant solution to a complex problem, and it's one of my favorite things about this game from a technical standpoint. The more basic monsters like the headcrabs still retain a simple AI, but while other developers struggle with pathfinding in their games, Valve has its level designers create the pathing themselves. And speaking of the level design, the entire game goes for a more realistic approach to the game world. High-tech labs, offices, maintenance tunnels, warehouses, the list goes on. The seamless transitions between different maps make the game look like one contiguous location. If it wasn't for the load times and the word loading plastered front and center, you would not realize this is happening. Even the enemies are loaded into the next segment with you, so if you're in a fight and just so happen to walk into a transitional hallway, the enemies will remain in their relative positions with the same health and the same frame of animation the moment the new level finishes loading. In very rare instances, you can even backtrack to previous chapters if you really wanted to, but only to a certain point, and there's really no reason to go back. It shows a natural progression and flow to the game, not the rigid level-by-level format we were used to. A handful of chapters have a part that acts as a hub for 2 or 3 other levels, usually requiring you to activate something in those areas before you can progress, but for the most part, the level design is linear and you're simply going from point A to point B. The focus on realism extends to its weapon and item placement as well. You have medkits in supply crates and on desks, weapons on weapon racks and by corpses. Even the storytelling to an extent lends itself to why certain things are placed where they are. While it does move away from a lot of the outlandish ideas prevalent in prior games of the time, Half-Life still maintained the tried and true level design formula of mixing things up and keeping it fresh. And it does it not just with the usual variations of monster placement, but it throws in some very simple objectives and puzzles. You have to run power and fuel to a test rocket to eliminate an alien in your path. You have to launch a satellite the military aborted. You have to go through a building that's rigged with trip mines, and you cannot activate a single one or the whole place goes off. You have to call down airstrikes to open a path to the next area. Right before you enter Zen, you acquire the ability to perform a long jump, and that changes the movement mechanics and how you approach the platforming segments. It's always giving you something new to work with, though some areas of the game tend to drag on a lot longer than it should. Zen just keeps going, and with the limited amount of ammo available here, you are using the Hornet gun most of the time because of its regenerating ammo. There's also many parts of the game where you're traversing lengthy networks of pipes and ventilation shafts, but I would say the most tedious part of the game is the rail system with the controllable trains. The trip mines around the corners forces me to slow down and disembark to set them off, and they disrupt the pacing of the game. You constantly run into blockades. This thing just seems to go on forever. It really feels like this was only added as an excuse to have a chapter that focused on controllable trains. It's a textbook example of building the level around a feature. It's supposed to be a good thing, but they went overboard here. You don't even need to use the trains to get through it. The game isn't pure run and gun, pure platforming, or a pure walking and crawling simulator. It mixes things up, though it can get tedious at times. But if you can look past all of that, you'll find that these tedious areas are only a fraction of the game, and the overall level design for the most part is pretty good. The challenge is definitely there. You have to use the full extent of your arsenal to beat this game, not simply because your ammo is maxed out and you have to find a way to use it, but because every weapon has a purpose and an enemy it's effective against. Even trip mines, a weapon that tends to be on the gimmicky side in other games, is very useful in Half-Life because of the AI and the pathing. The assassins are extremely difficult to deal with because of their stealthy hit-and-run tactics, but they still run through trip mines when they try to get behind you. The difficulties don't simply increase the number of enemies or the damage you receive. The easy difficulty enables auto-aim, while the hard difficulty reduces the charge-up times for the attacks of different enemies, and in some cases they gain an additional ability, like the assassin's ability to cloak. The attacks of many of these enemies are hit-scan and highly accurate, forcing you to move tactically and make good use of cover. If you run out into the open like an idiot, you will die. It's nowhere near the realism of a mill sim, but it's not like you can circle strafe your way to victory either. It pushes you to use your full arsenal and the surrounding area to your advantage. I think the combat holds up very well, even to this day. In addition to the grouping of the weapons, the game raised the bar when it came to the controls. Half-Life was the first game to use WASD controls as the default, or more specifically, it uses Thresh's movement keys as the default. For those who don't know who Thresh is, he's the co-founder of Xfire and the player who won John Carmack's Ferrari in a Quake tournament, largely because of the high degree of control he got from his key bindings. And now that same level of control was passed on to the average player by default. Because the engine is a fork of the Quake 1 engine, it is possible to strafe jump in the game and move really fast. But because of the many narrow corridors and death falls in the levels, it's not something you would want to do here, unless you're doing a speedrun. In many cases, you want to take your time and move slowly. This was the first game I played where pressing shift would allow you to walk instead of run. I love how they set this up. It's very useful for the platforming sections, and while these are very frequent throughout the game, they tend to be simple and short, but appropriate given the destruction happening around you. The movement goes hand in hand with the stealth system. You generate a lot of noise when you're running around, walking will make less noise, and crouch moving will make you near silent. Noise will aggro most enemies, in addition to their sight. It's a very simple system, but it's not as cracked up as the name would suggest. I have found absolutely no benefit to sneaking past anyone. Sooner or later, you will have to fight them, so I used the opportunity to pick them off when they're standing still. The only exception I found is when you're face to face with the tentacles, the monster that relies purely on sound to find you. Usually when you have to go past them, the game provides you with some grenades nearby so you can generate some noise away from you. The quality of the sound effects is quite low, and that's easy to notice. The weapons and explosions are loud and powerful just the way I like it. The sounds of sirens and machinery adds to the environment. The soldiers' voices have a garbled radio sound to them, even when they're in close proximity. All of their generic voice lines are actually compiled from a collection of pre-recorded words, so they're easy to change around without recording anything again, but it doesn't have the quality of an actual voice line. They are helpful since they indicate what action they'll be taking against you, such as throwing a grenade or moving out of cover to attack you, but all of the sound in the game has that low quality 11 kHz frequency. It's not to the point that it drives you crazy, but you will notice it. Half-Life's soundtrack does a great job of establishing the mood. Rather than sticking with one theme for the soundtrack, the music depends a lot on the context. Ambient and darker music for those creepy environments you have to trudge through, and the more upbeat and energetic music for those action-packed moments. Nothing too memorable, but the music only has one job and it does it well. The overall look and feel of the game strives for a realistic environment, and it does it well when it comes to the level design. Blood splatters on the wall when you attack a monster, and the particle effects from explosions and gunshots look clean and crisp. While the new features of the engine include skeletal animation for the 3D models and direct 3D support, it doesn't do much for the textures. They look fine from a distance, but it turns into a blurry mess up close, or heavily pixelated with a software renderer. When you compare it to other engines, such as the Unreal Engine, or you look at the previews of Bungie's then upcoming game Halo, Half-Life's graphics were pretty weak, even for 1998, and it certainly hasn't aged well at all. Even games running the Lithtech engine have aged poorly, yet can still look better than this game. The low resolution of the skyboxes become apparent in the outdoor areas where you can see it from the side, such as here in the canyon. Every game before Half-Life had this problem as well, but it was mitigated by the fact that you were only shown the top of the skybox. Fortunately, everything else in the game made the graphics nothing more than a minor blemish, but it always stuck out in my mind as the game's biggest weakness. Gearbox Software had the task of creating the expansions and console ports for the game. The Dreamcast port was notable, mainly because it was cancelled. Sega's production of the Dreamcast was discontinued before the port was finished, but instead of scrapping it completely, Gearbox saved many of its unique features and ultimately used them in their other projects. The game was ported to the PlayStation 2 in 2001. Much of the game had enhancements from the Dreamcast version, including models, weapons, and minor changes to some of the levels. It even manages to hit a constant 60 frames per second, and I'd say the controls are actually pretty good for a controller. Though it doesn't have auto-aim, it does have a lock-on feature so you can pick and choose your targets in a fight. It supports 2-player deathmatch, but not the 4-player deathmatch that was much more popular at the time for consoles. It also includes a 2-player co-op campaign called Half-Life Decay, played from the perspectives of Dr. Cross and Dr. Green during the Resonance Cascade. Much of its level design, weapon placement, and puzzles are based around this 2-player setup. I like the fact that you can play this by yourself, though it's very clunky because you're constantly switching between 2 different characters. I just like the fact that you can do this. But the campaign itself felt like it emphasized puzzles over the action. It was a nice addition, and while the co-op campaign was well received, it wasn't a reason to buy this version of the game. It hasn't been officially released on PC, but a team of modders extracted the PlayStation 2 game files, ported them, and released it on PC in 2008. Normally, when you port a game from PC to console, you have to make concessions and take things out or simplify them to make it work on less powerful hardware. That doesn't seem to be the case here. Every single level in the single-player campaign is present here, with some minor changes to improve it, not simplify it. The only thing missing is online multiplayer, and that's a given for the time period. But the fact that nothing was taken away from the single player, nothing was dumbed down to make it work, or optimize it for the hardware, and even included some local multiplayer options, I'd say the PlayStation 2 version of Half-Life is quite possibly one of the best PC to console ports ever made. Gearbox's other content is up there as well. Opposing Force puts you in the role of Corporal Adrian Shepard, a soldier as part of the cleanup crew sent to Black Mesa. It added new weapons to your arsenal, and it adds a few new enemies that forces you to tweak your playstyle. It has a fairly lengthy campaign, though not as long as the original game. It doesn't have any of those long and tedious parts that drags on. The game lore is also expanded by showing Half-Life's story from the perspective of the military and who Gordon Freeman is to them. Many of the levels were rehashed for the expansion, though that is justifiable given the context of the game world, but I noticed that the health and ammo pickups are much stingier here than the original game. You have to pick your shots more carefully and take engagements more carefully as well. It's challenging and it offers something a little bit different. I would recommend this. Blue Shift places you on the Black Mesa security team as Barney Calhoun. It was supposed to be exclusive content for the Dreamcast version, but they made it available on PC instead. It has the same enhanced models and weapons as the PlayStation 2 port, but those improvements were much easier to gauge on PC with its higher resolution, and it turned out not to be much of an improvement after all. Blue Shift plays out the same as vanilla Half-Life, and it's fairly short as well. As an expansion, it doesn't really add much, content or gameplay wise. Barney is simply doing what Gordon Freeman and Adrian Shepard have always been doing. Combat, puzzles, platforming, same old stuff. That's not to say it's bad. It does almost everything right, but almost nothing new. It's the kind of thing you would get as part of a bundle, and that's exactly how Blue Shift was sold. It included Opposing Force and it updated vanilla Half-Life with the enhanced models. Half-Life had amazing post-release content, but much of it never came from Gearbox, or even Valve for that matter. It came from the amazing community and what they did with the game. Before Steam was even conceived, Half-Life's community and multiplayer support went through Sierra's World Opponent Network, or WON for short. The game had the usual dedicated server support, but WON was used for the server browser. Deathmatch was fast and furious as ever, and you quickly learned that the tactics you used in other games do not apply here, and a few tweaks were made from the single player. The Tau cannon charged up much faster here, and the crossbow fired explosive bolts unzoomed. From my experience, the best weapons turned out to be the one-hit kill weapons, of which the game had plenty of. The plain deathmatch formula was still popular by this time, but many players were beginning to figure out what kind of weapons and gameplay they wanted in a deathmatch, and it wasn't in Half-Life. Many other players were beginning to get bored of deathmatch altogether, and they wanted something fresh and original. And that's where the modding community comes into play. Half-Life had a huge advantage over other games when it came to modding. The Gold Source engine is a fork of the Quake 1 engine, so when the game was released, Quake and Quake 2 modders were already proficient with the tools. Worldcraft was updated to support Half-Life, and the rights to it would eventually be purchased by Valve and turned into the Hammer editor used for Half-Life 2. Modders quickly got up to speed with Half-Life's offerings. They organized themselves on modding websites, forums, and chat rooms, and they put out some amazing content. Earth Special Forces is a mod based on Dragon Ball Z. It's a very complicated game featuring many of the characters from the anime series, as well as their insanely powerful special attacks. It effectively turns the game from a first-person shooter into a team-based third-person fighting game, and it grew its own niche community. And that's just one example. The Specialists, Weapons Factory, Natural Selection, and others were all created by the community, and in some cases, Valve purchased the rights to these mods. They became notorious for bringing on modders to create commercial versions of their mods. The creator of Navy SEAL's Quake and Action Quake 2 sold the rights to Counter-Strike when that was in beta, and this became one of the most popular mods in the world, and it had a standalone retail release as well. Same thing with Day of Defeat, a team-based World War II mod. They even remade popular Quake mods. The team behind Quake Team Fortress was hired to remake the mod in Half-Life, and that became Team Fortress Classic. The single-player mods were top tier as well. They Hunger is a horror-based single-player campaign spanning 3 episodes. It replaces the brightly lit high-tech environments of Black Mesa and puts you in very dark and creepy places with hordes of zombies. The work put into this rivals that of even AAA games at the time. The same could be said for many of these mods, both single-player and multiplayer. Half-Life was just another example of a game where you spent more time playing mods and the content from the community than the content from the developer itself. What Valve did was give us the tools to make our ideas come to life, and it was one of the first instances where a developer supported modders directly. Before you played the game and all of its awesome community-made content, the natural course of action would be to play the demo. There were actually 2 demos made for the game, one of which was a pre-release demo that had the first 3 chapters. This demo could only be found bundled exclusively with certain video cards at the time, and there were many changes made before the official launch, such as balance changes and new 3D models. The official publicly available demo was called Half-Life Uplink. What Valve did was recycle and modify levels removed from the game during development. Your goal is to adjust a transmitter to open a door, come back, and then get to safety. It showed off a few of the basic weapons, the alien and soldier AI, and the chaos ensuing as you progress. It takes less than 30 minutes on the hardest difficulty to get through it. You got a good taste of the game, and it left you wanting more. This demo is what got me to buy Half-Life in the first place, and the same could be said for a lot of other people. The graphics can be a huge turnoff in this day and age, but fortunately, you do have other options. Half-Life Source is the entire single-player campaign ported to the newer Source engine. It has the same levels and gameplay, but with better graphics, though the expansions did not have the same treatment. It might be a better option if you want the original game and you also want something decent to look at. Or, if you want to take it a step further, you can check out what is simply called Black Mesa. A team of modders are recreating the entire game from scratch using the Source engine. It has bigger and more detailed levels, better pacing, better overall sound design, and even though it's still in development, it looks awesome and it plays awesome. But let's not forget the history of this game and what it's done for the video game industry. Half-Life is not just the time it takes for radioactive material to decay to half of its initial mass. Half-Life is a game that was innovative in many ways. The way it tells the story, the control scheme and the standards it set, its solution to AI and pathing, even its combat. It was making waves even before the game was released. In a way, the release of Half-Life made other games worse. It forced the hand of publishers to release their competing games early. Sin was shipped out to retail stores in a very unpolished state, just to take the spotlight and sell units before Half-Life could take it away from them, but it backfired with its low review scores and ultimately its lower sales numbers. Other games have suffered the same fate with the same bad business decisions, and it made Half-Life look better by comparison. That's not to say Half-Life was a perfect game. It's weak in many regards. The graphics were relatively poor, and it had a few underdeveloped features like the stealth system, but it's strong where it counted the most. We have an amazing game in and of itself, but it gave modders more power than they ever had before. It gave them more opportunities to show the world what they're made of, and it launched many careers in the video game industry. It's a game worth checking out in all of its forms.